So in this build, you're going to jolt a lot of targets. You're also going to be spawning in tons of ionic traces, which will give you tons of ability energy. And 3, you're also going to be generating tons of fire sprites, which would also give you even more grenade energy. And you're also going to be spawning in tons of stasis crystals, which you can slow and freeze targets as well. And you're also going to be getting volatile rounds whenever you get a kill from a target. And you're also going to be getting a void overshield as well. So for this build, you are combining 4 subclasses into one. So from everything I'm using for this build, you can get it for free. If you guys would like to see another free-to-play build, be sure to let me know in the comments. And if you guys would like to see another build that's inspired by another dungeon or raid, be sure to let me know in the comments as well. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Let us first start with the Warlock subclass, aka the Stormcaller. For the super ability, we are using Storm Trance, in which we can also jolt targets, which stuns overload champions. And if you guys are curious to know why I'm using the super, it's because of the exotic armor piece we are using for this build. We'll get onto that later. For the abilities, let's start with the class ability. I do recommend going for Healing Rift for that constant healing whenever you're inside of it. For your arc melee, I do like to have range, so I do prefer using ball lightning. And if you are amplified, in which case we are going to be 100% of the time, it would release an additional lightning strike before detonating. And for the arc grenade, there's 2 that you could use for this build. For me, I'm using pulse grenade, but for the other one, you could also use storm grenade. For the aspects, I am using arc soul, so whenever you cast your rift, it would create an arc soul that fires at a target in front of you. And also whenever your teammates pass through that rift as well, they would also get an arc buddy. And to make this even more better, your rift also charges faster whenever your teammates are near the rift. And if you are amplified, your arc souls have increased fire rate. For the second aspect, I am using electrostatic mind, so whenever you defeat a target with your arc abilities, or whenever you defeat a jolted or blinded target, it would create an ionic trace. And whenever you collect an ionic trace, it would also make you amplified. So whenever you run for a short time, it would increase your movement speed, and it would also increase your weapon handling. The first one is Spark of Shock. Your arc grenades jolt targets, and it would give you -10 discipline. The second one is Spark of Magnitude. Your arc grenades, aka your storm grenade or your pulse grenade, have extended duration, so they're gonna last longer. The third one is Spark of Amplitude. So if you kill 2 or more enemies while you're amplified, it would give you an orb of power that will grant 2.5% super energy, and the cooldown is 10 seconds. The fourth fragment is Spark of Ions. Whenever you killed a jolted enemy, it would create an ionic trace. And now let's talk which prophecy weapons I was using for this build. For the kinetic weapon, I'm using the Stasis hand cannon called the Judgment. And here are the perks that I do recommend going for. The first perk column is Headstone. Precision final blows spawns a stasis crystal at the victim's location. And what's cool about Headstone is that you can be able to stun overload champions as well because of the seasonal artifact mods that we are using. And for the other perk, I do recommend going for timed payload. Projectiles attached to the enemy explode after a short delay. It's kind of like explosive payload, but it has a short delay. For the energy weapon, I'm using this void shotgun called a Sudden Death. Here are the perks that you should be running. The first one is Repulsor's Brace. Whenever you defeat a void debuff target, it would grant you an overshield for 8 seconds. So in order for us to get a void debuff kill, we are going to need to use this other perk called Destabilizing Rounds. Final blows causes nearby targets to become volatile. I do want to give you guys a heads up that for the perks on the Judgment, I don't have timed payload, and for the shotgun, I do not have Repulsor's Brace. Just be sure to keep that in mind, but be sure to go for those perks. Now onto the power weapon. I am using the solar rocket launcher called the Dragon's Breath. And you guys are wondering, don't you have to pay for this rocket launcher? Well, technically you don't, because if you were to go to the season pass, and if you are level 35, you can actually get it for free. So as long as you reach level 35 in the battle pass, you can get it for free. And at the time that I'm recording, the season ends in 88 days, so I'm pretty sure you guys have plenty of time to get this rocket launcher if you do not have it. So let's talk about what this rocket launcher does. The weapon perk is High Octane. Whenever you ignite nearby targets, it would partially replenish its fuel, so this weapon refills itself from reserves upon gaining maximum fuel. So if you do have ×5 fuel, it would reload this rocket launcher. It's kind of like auto-loading holster. For the intrinsic trait, it's called Composite Propellant. Rockets embed themselves and struck targets and periodically inject incendiary fuel that inflicts Scorch. The longer this weapon goes without firing, the more fuel the next rocket contains. And if you do have the catalyst for this rocket launcher, all it would do is that it would 1, spawn in fire sprites whenever you defeat targets, and 2, 2, it would refill the fuel faster. And on to the seasonal artifact mods that I was using for this build. I'm just gonna let you guys know what are the main ones that you should be going for. I'm using Flame, Fiber, and Freeze. Combines the Solar/Stasis Siphon into one. The second one is Blast Radius. Rapid final blows with rocket launchers grant an armor charge. And the last one on the third column is From Whence You Came. Increases ability damage to taken and scorned combatants. Now on the fourth column, I am using Pillar of Ice. Defeating a frozen target spawns a stasis crystal. So here's how you can be able to freeze targets. So when you're using the hand cannon, be sure to get a precision kill nearby other targets if you do want to freeze them, because as soon as you spot in that stasis crystal, it will freeze targets around that crystal. The next one is Overload Rocket Launchers. You can be able to stun Overload champions when using rocket launchers, and you're also going to increase your damage up to 80% when dealing with Overload champions when using a rocket. And the final column, I'm using Hail the Storm. Shattering frozen targets and stasis crystals deal increased damage. Shattering stasis crystals releases shards of ice that damages and slows targets, which will equivalent to stunning Overload champions if you hit them with that slow projectile. And the last one I'm using is Argent Ordnance. Firing a rocket launcher consumes 1 stack of armor charge, granting increased damage and reload speed until you reload or stow your rocket launcher. Here's what exotic armor piece I'm using for this build. I'm using Crown of Tempests. So if you would get an arc ability or a jolt kill, it would grant this perk called Conduction Tines for 7 seconds up to the maximum of 3 stacks. So if you were to have 3 stacks of this buff, it would give you 502% additional base grenade, melee, and super regeneration rate. And you can also extend the duration for your Storm Trance. This is why I was using that super. And if you would have tier 3 of Conduction Times, it would decrease the passive super drain whenever you activate your Storm Trance. So it will last 66% longer. So here are the champions that you'll be able to stun. You are going to be stunning unstoppable champions because we are using the hand cannon. And 2, we are going to be stunning Overload champions because we are using Overload rocket launchers, and we're also going to be jolting targets. For the stats, I do recommend going for Resilience to give you that 30% damage reduction, and also Discipline for your grenade cooldown if you would like to spam it a bit quicker. So let's head to the armor mods. As what you guys are seeing here, you can take a picture or copy it in the link in the description. But here are the main mods that I'm going to mention that are most important for this build. For the leg armor, I am using Elemental Charge, so whenever you collect an Ionic Trace, it would have an escalating chance to give you an armor charge. So we are going to need to use this mod on the gauntlet called Grenade Kickstart. So basically what this does is that whenever you have armor charges available and you were to activate your grenade, it will consume your armor charges into grenade energy. So the more armor charges we have, the more grenade energy we're going to be receiving. So for the chest armor, I am using Charged Up, which will increase my armor charge stacks up to 1. So we are going to be having 4 in total. If you did enjoy this video and would like to see more, be sure to let me know in the comments and also subscribe. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, evening, or afternoon. Take care and peace. Join the Discord!